Welcome to my November wrap-up, and now with my new shelf. Isn't it gorgeous? I'm very happy with it. My last video was about building this shelf, so if you are interested, go and watch that one. In this video, we'll go through the books that I have read in this November month. October wasn't really a great reading month, so I'm glad to say that November really was a good month for reading. I think we'll just jump right in. Some of these books I've made reviews about on my channel, so you can check them out, and others I haven't. So, the first one I have made a review about, and that's The Fortune Men by Nadifa Mohamed. Shortlisted for this year's Booker Prize, and one of the surprises in the bunch, because this book I really enjoyed. It's set in 1950s Cardiff, and it's about a young man called Mahmoud Nathan. He is wrongly accused of murder, and we follow his journey through the judicial system, but also the tale of his upbringing and arriving in Cardiff and his whole story. It's based on a true story, and Nadifa Mohamed heard about this story many years ago and decided that this was a tale she wanted to talk about. It deals with a lot of difficult topics like racism and how it is leaving your home country and the things that are known to you and coming to a different culture. The thing that really hooked me from the beginning of this book is how well the author describes the era they are living in, so 1950s, and the places they visit, and in general the atmosphere of the world in the 1950s. I discovered about my reading and myself that I like very much when the world is described and historical aspects are dragged into a novel. It sort of gives me a spark. It's so great at just placing you in the book's world. Also, I should say that this is the first book I've read that really describes racism in a systemic way and in the everyday racism aspect. And this was useful and heartbreaking, of course, and written in a really engaging way. So when I read about it, I enjoyed reading about it, even though it's not enjoyable. I can really recommend this book, and it's one of the books that really surprised me. The Fortune Men wasn't really the first book I started reading this month, but it was the first book that I finished. The first book I started reading was Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, a book that actually started out as a BBC series where Neil Gaiman wrote the script, and then later Neil Gaiman thought that wasn't all that great, and he wrote the book. This book I also really loved. I've talked a lot about Neil Gaiman earlier. It seems to be the author that I've found this year. Neil Gaiman said that he wanted to write a fairy tale for grown-ups, and that's the feeling I got when I read this book, so yay him. It's about a young man called Richard Mayhew who has this business job in London and has a gruesome girlfriend, and one day he stumbles upon a girl on the sidewalk who seems to be very hurt, and he decides that he wants to help her. That leads to the girlfriend leaving him, because why would you want to help someone that's hurt when you have a restaurant appointment? This girl doesn't just bring joy to his life. He is sort of dragged into this London below, which is a parallel universe to London above, and that's where the magic happens. That sounded weird, but it's also very true. If you know London, this book might be even more fun, because they visit places in London and references to popular London places, and I've been there a couple of times, so I think that is enhancing the experience of reading this book. I love this book for all the reasons I've loved the other Neil Gaiman stuff. The characters are really quirky, and all the characters, no matter how small part they play in this book, I really love them. From start to finish. They all have very special traits, many of them, and they're all memorable. So for a person like me who has trouble remembering a lot of characters, it really helps when they have something special that makes you remember them well. All the characters, for me at least, are fun also, even though they're mean. They are pretty fun, often in the way they try to be mean. I also have to say that I love the way the characters are relatable, so the main character in this book, Richard, is a hopeless man, but I often felt that that could have been me. On too many occasions. If there's any doubt left, I do recommend this book as well. I really loved it. We are now leaving happy and joining depressing with Aldous Huxley Brave New World, released in 1932 and a big classic. This book has been on my TBR for a long time, even before I learned what TBR stood for, so that says nothing. Often this book is compared to 1984, and I read that book by George Orwell, and so I thought, why not read this one as well? What is this depressing book really about? Well, it's a dystopian novel about a world where a lot of babies are being hatched but not born, and people are having a lot of sex but not to make babies. That would be a crime, and you are predetermined to be the human that the world leaders decide you're going to be. You can say that when the people in the book are being born and their brain is developed, the society sort of stops their brain development when they think their role is fulfilled. For this edition, Margaret Atwood has written the preface for the book, and I haven't read her books, but I've watched Handmaid's Tale, and there are really many similarities in how the world is built up and what role religion plays in it, so that was kind of interesting to think about. And of course, outside of this society there is a normal world for us, but complete chaos for the people inside the world, and so these societies are sort of put up against each other. Also, a central thing in this book is a drug called soma, which people are given to be happy or in equilibrium or something like that, but it plays a huge role in the book, and many interesting points are given around this. A thing that annoyed me about this book is that there were quite a few times where there were a lot of talk like, then he did that, that was shocking, and then no one says what was shocking about that, and it takes quite a long time until you learn why that was shocking. It was not a difficult thing to read about, but it was an irritating thing to read about, because I felt it was kind of a childish way of writing. The thing I really enjoyed about this classic, compared to other classics, is how relatable the things are and specific. So when they are discussing things, for one, I understood that this is the moment where you're supposed to think, so that was great. And the second thing is that when I really started to think, I put down the book and actually thought. So that's unusual for me, or at least the first book that have had that effect. And I hope I get more of these reading experiences where a book makes me really reflect in the way I did when reading this book. I thought this book was okay. I didn't get too engaged in the plot. I did not regret this read either. The Norwegian book this month is Tollak to Ingeborg by Renberg, published in 2020, and it has been all over my social media feed for as long as I can remember. But just such a big hit, this book, and I really wanted to participate in the hype. This is one of the books that when I read on the back cover, I was really intrigued, and I'm lying because this back cover is full of quotes. But when I read about this book, it was really intriguing. The book is about Tollak, who is married to Ingeborg, so that's the title. Tollak is not the social type where everyone loves Ingeborg. No one really loves Tollak. They have 2 kids that does not visit Tollak that much after Ingeborg died, and the town just does not care for him, and he's a man of older fashion. He is not a part of today's society, and this is something he points out himself. But something has happened in the past that no one really knows about except Tollak, and he is now ready to talk about it. So that's the tagline. The book is really easily read. It has these small pages, or little writing per page. The writing is very honest and brutal, and sometimes almost vulgar, or at least that's what I thought. I would say that I thought I would be more emotionally moved by this book. I was not, but a lot of people said that it brought them to tears. I wasn't in the right mood, I guess. Still a very beautifully written book. I think the language and the way it was written is the thing that stuck with me after I finished the book, and that's spectacular because that hasn't happened a lot. The book grew on me the further I got when reading it, but I can't say that I feel the hype at maximum level, at least. Might read more from Renberg. He has a lot of famous books in Norway, so I know the stories quite well. And now over to a book that I've been wanting to read for a while. It was one of the first books that I actively bought after I started this channel and started reading the books. And I've been putting it on hold for a while because it's a big book and I thought I really would enjoy it. So I thought I'd save it so I could have something to look forward to. And that is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. Of course, as I said earlier in this video, I started to love Neil Gaiman, and this was a book that a friend said that might not be for me, but since I love the other books, I thought this would be great. I should say that this book and me got off to a bad start, and that's mainly because all the other Neil Gaiman books I've read have been quite quirky and funny, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I've loved them. But this book isn't all that funny, so my expectations were crushed from the start, and I was just waiting for the funny to begin. And of course, at some point this book is funny, but not in the sense that I wanted to. The book is supposed to be a road trip book, trying to find the spirits of America, and we meet Shadow, who is released from prison, and when he comes out of prison, he gets picked up by a guy called Wednesday, and he claims to be a god. And so the journey begins. It's difficult for me to sum this book up without spoiling anything, so I'll just say that in the book we meet a lot of gods. Not all gods agree with each other, and there's a lot of traveling, a lot of sleeping in cars, a lot of motel rooms, and a lot of weird characters. And I should say again, a lot of characters. As I also said earlier, I struggle with many characters, and this book has them all. And I found it quite difficult to follow the story at some points because it's not always clear who is who, and many of them have similar names. And also there is one character who has a brother, but basically he's the same person, he just has two names. The book jumps a lot back and forth in time, where we meet gods who come to America for the first time in 1300 BC, and then suddenly we are in the present, and suddenly we're another place with another god. I found it to be very confusing at times. There's also a lot of dreaming going on, so sometimes I don't know if it's a dream or if it's reality. This really disappointed me. I really wanted this book to be great, and so I am disappointed and sad. But I've read it, so maybe there's sort of a silver lining in that I discovered that Neil Gaiman doesn't just write one type of book, which I love. Maybe he has a book that's completely different from all of the books that I would enjoy more. Maybe. Oh, I'm going to start thinking that that's the case. I should say many of the characters are interesting, but they're more interesting than they are funny. Compared to the other books, I really like some of the characters, but they are not funny, and so when I sort of thought they would be, that's too bad. But they are interesting, and there's a lot more depth, I would say, to many of the characters in this book compared to the other books. So that might be great if that's what you're after. Disclaimer, I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. If that's because I love Neil Gaiman, I have no clue. But that's what I did. Probably because I know that I can be, let's just say, unfair. So that was it. So that's a really, really nice stack of books that are going into my shelf, which I'm really happy with. So have you read any of these books? And based on my opinions, do you have any recommendations for me? Please leave a comment, and I'll see you and you'll see me and the new bookshelf in another video, which I also think is very great. So I'll see you next time. Bye!